Sometimes in politics, a moment arrives when an entire story shrinks into a single headline, while the real truth hides deep beneath the surface. What happened in Minnesota was exactly such a moment. The headlines were screaming that the president had ended temporary protections for Somali immigrants, and that single line spread like wildfire. But behind that headline was a whole machinery, an extensive network, and a curtain of secrecy hiding a story far darker, more complex, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. Mass-scale welfare fraud, money laundering routes, fake invoices, false claims in child-feeding programs, and money quietly slipping out of the local system into places abroad. Regions marked not just by political instability, but by armed groups holding entire territories hostage. For an ordinary citizen, these might have looked like rumors or temporary controversies. But when federal investigators began connecting the dots, the story turned in a direction that shook the. This wasn't just a matter of policy. It was a question of how long a system can be trusted when its foundations are being hollowed out from within. Trump's decision was not merely a reaction. It was the final link in a chain that had begun long before. Programs designed to feed children, support the elderly, or provide housing to poor families were turned into income streams for a few individuals. Fake records were created. Claims were filed in the names of people who didn't exist. Papers were submitted without doctors' signatures. And it all happened on such a large scale that local audit systems were crushed under the weight. Red flags kept rising, but they were either ignored or buried under overwhelming workload. Meanwhile, the money continued to flow through the same channels, labeled as business expenses, loans, or social service funds, but in reality, filling the pockets of a silent network. The most alarming part was that the money didn't stay local. Investigations revealed that at some point it was being sent abroad, to places where state systems are weak and armed groups demand their share in the name of taxation. Some reports even mentioned groups that control entire regions by force. Certainly, not every foreign transaction can be linked to terrorism, but when the flow of money repeatedly heads into such territories, a troubling question naturally arises. Is taxpayers' money ending up in the wrong hands? If yes, then since when and who knew? The political landscape became the most tangled part of this entire story. Several districts in Minnesota had long been represented by a particular politician, a figure known for advocating compassion, inclusion, and community development. But when investigations linked some businesses and organizations from those districts to the scandal, questions arose not just about the network, but about representation itself. People began asking, if these businesses were involved in fraud for years, did no one ever suspect anything? Did the local office overlook something? Or was it just a coincidence that the same institutions, once praised for supporting the community, ended up facing serious allegations? Opponents seized the opportunity and used every incident as proof, whether relevant or not. A video in which the representative was praising a restaurant suddenly became ammunition when it was discovered that the same restaurant was part of the fake invoice network. The truth is, in politics, optics often outweigh reality, and once an image is out there, no one looks for intent. They only judge the outcome. Yet fairness demands that every individual be judged based on evidence, not pictures or gatherings. The entire community grew anxious. Elderly citizens who had paid taxes all their lives were now disturbed, wondering where the money meant for feeding poor children was going. Parents worried whether school lunch programs, once strong, might now weaken. Some felt the scandal would be used against their entire community, as if a whole group were being collectively labeled as dishonest. And this fear was not baseless. When political earthquakes strike, ordinary people often carry the burden. The federal response was fierce. The cancellation of TPS was not just a legal move, but a powerful political message. If you misuse the system, the entire structure can be shaken. But thousands of innocent families were affected. People who had never participated in any fraud, yet could not escape the consequences of the environment created around them. Their jobs, their homes, their children's futures. Everything became uncertain. Local activists called it unjust, arguing that the actions of a few were being used to punish an entire community. But at the federal level, the stance was that eliminating corruption requires the harshest measures. There is also a technical dimension to this story that few understand. Remittance channels. Many immigrants send money back home, sometimes through formal banks, sometimes through small money exchangers, and sometimes through personal networks. When this system becomes informal, monitoring weakens. Some individuals exploited these informal routes, hiding the source of money and sending it to places where tracking becomes nearly impossible. The solution is not to shut these routes down completely, because thousands rely on them to support their families, but to make them safe, documented, and transparent. Political, social, and religious leaders also bear responsibility. If influential community figures emphasize transparency, avoid unclear financial activities, and publicly encourage accountability, such networks weaken. But if silence prevails, questions go unasked, and relationships become substitutes for trust, fraud continues to flourish. The real damage is not just financial. The real damage is the loss of trust. A community once united begins to doubt one another. Representatives once seen as beacons of hope begin to carry the weight of accusation. Programs designed to serve the public become objects of suspicion. The effects of this can last generations. The Minnesota incident teaches us that reform is not merely about punishment. It is the process of rebuilding the entire structure. Stronger oversight, transparent records, accountable leadership, and genuine compassion for deserving people. If this lesson is learned in time, the system can become stronger. If not, the incident that once dominated headlines